Well, good morning, folks, and thank you, Marjorie, for setting things up very nicely. What I want to do is place ourselves in the historical timeline. We've been working on these issues for many decades. As I look around the room, I see younger people and I see older people. Many of you remember each of these battles and the wins and losses. And yet we're all still a little bit troubled by, do we have the right theory of the problem? What are the important things to think about with climate change? And should we be paying more attention to adapting to change, to mitigating change, to optimizing change? What are the useful ways to think about it? And I think many of us have adopted what I'll call a natural hazard management type of framework for thinking about these issues. And there's a nice logical story here. Natural phenomena happen. Natural hazards result when those phenomena intersect with human activities. People respond. They respond in two major ways. One is to adapt to change, and that's something that humans have always done, always will do. We are an adaptable species. That's the natural first response. That's what we're good at. In some cases, we try to mitigate the problem. We try to address the problem. And that's something we're not so good at. And that fundamental distinction between adaptation that we're good at and mitigation that we're not so good at is going to carry through the rest of my remarks today. And I'll be interested in seeing how you respond in the later panels on that topic. But another key part of the story in many of our minds is that humans are not passive. We create stuff. And some of that, in fact, closes the feedback loop and affects the nature of those phenomena. Just to make it clear, I think this is a great framework, and it's useful up until the point when it's not. And we're at that point when it's not, is what I'm going to say. Okay, so let's do a very quick tour. Marjorie has already done most of this work for me, so I'm going to be very quick through this section. We've got the rising temperatures. We've got the rising sea levels. We've got the increasing precipitation. We have other climatic changes, from changing sea ice to changing ocean surface pHs, to the nature of major storms. And all of that is affecting us, especially because we are causing some of that. We have seen exponential population growth, exponential growth in agricultural land use, industrialization, fossil fuel extraction, economic growth pursuing a higher standard of living, and the connections to all of these human activities are pretty clear, as we've been saying. We are also putting more stuff in harm's way, and I want to spend a minute on this chart. The background chart is New Jersey's population from the year 1800 on up to today, and you can see the robust growth, some of it triggered by important decisions that humans have made. Building the New Trenton to New Brunswick Turnpike, which eventually became US Route 1. We did this back in 1803. 1854, we were building railroads, and we got our first railroad out to the shore, to Atlantic City. And so immediately followed lots of people who said, I like being on the shore, and I don't really know that there are storm events. I don't really know about flooding, but I'll learn, I guess. And so we started intensifying development in areas that are in fact risky. We can advance forward to the 1950s and the Garden State Parkway, the New Jersey Turnpike, which really opened the floodgates and allowed development in all sorts of places around the state. we decanted New York City into the state of New Jersey. And in that process, transformed the landscape and put a lot of stuff in harm's way. Okay, when we think about the hazards, again, we've heard this recitation, extreme heat. One thing we didn't mention is the uneven incidence of extreme heat that's experienced. And part of this relates to decisions that we've made in seemingly unrelated areas, such as the Homeowners Loan Corporation risk classifications that redlined certain neighborhoods. Those are the neighborhoods now that see more intense heat islands because they lack tree cover. The deadly storms, we've grown accustomed to naming them, and we're still not as accustomed to trying to tag how many deaths are attached to each of them. But here's a timeline over a couple of centuries of the deadly storms for which we have good records. And we see recent years showing some peaks, mostly, I think, because of the putting stuff in harm's way problem. We've experienced, pretty much everyone in this room, the variants of recent floods, storm surges, the tidal flooding, which is increasing at an increasing rate, the extreme precipitation events. And all of that has gotten us arguing. And so the thing is, we just make decisions not just through the world of public policy, which is expecting what's going to be a major focus of today, but also through our discussions about culture. Is the car culture a good thing? What about our housing choices? Why do we want that house in the suburbs? Is the McMansion the ideal, or is the bungalow the ideal, or the little apartment the ideal? The ways we use energy, and this is something that's come back in recent years as we've invented cool new things like artificial intelligence that requires data centers. And even our food choices what did you eat this morning out there? Were you optimizing for reduced climate impact or for something else? In my case, I was optimizing for trying to wake up and have some energy to go. The marketplace is also not a bystander here. The marketplace is where we make most of our decisions. Real estate market decisions, are they well informed? Insurance markets, those are becoming a very clear signal about where risk is located in this country. Mortgage markets are responding and traditionally have been the lever to get people to pay attention to risk management considerations. And then finally we get to the politics and the public policy, regulations, tax policy, innovation policy, infrastructure policy, local land use planning are all the tools that we have available. Okay, now if we dive into the adaptation world, the stuff that we're good at as a species, in fact, we can see, going back, this timeline is busy, and as Marjorie mentioned, big poster versions of all these are outside, and they're meant for you to scroll on, to comment on, to say, you forgot something, or that thing wasn't so important after all. So please do that later on. But starting, back in the year 1914, New Jersey had a Waterfront Development Act. It was essentially enshrining a common law principle that the king owns everything on the ocean side of the beach, and therefore, in a sovereign state, the people own everything on the ocean side of the beach. And that established a set of rights which are important today around, everything from beach access to who's responsible for maintaining all of that. You can carry through, and the way to read these timelines is that the upper half is what's going on nationally, and so that's issues like the first beach nourishment effort ever done in the United States was in Coney Island way back at the beginning of the 20th century. on through to the Coastal Zone Management Act, which helped set the stage for what in New Jersey, which is the bottom half here, we decided to do. And important things were the Wetlands Act, the Coastal Area Facility Review Act, CAFRA, that's something we've heard a lot about and rely on, up through the development of the Blue Acres program in 1995. And this stuff continues up to the present. The Murphy administration is the area in green and onward, just to sort of locate us in time. And a couple of things to call out. One is the unending stream of beach nourishment projects. We keep investing money, close to $100 million, more than that, I'm sure, billions of dollars, in fact. And we see some action at the federal level, important things, FEMA getting started, FEMA getting the National Flood Insurance Program getting started, efforts to amend it to make it actuarially sound after Hurricane Katrina bankrupted it. Important things in recent years, I just want to highlight one, and that's the flood disclosure law passed last year that finally requires sellers of property to tell buyers of property, oh yeah, we got flooded a few years ago. It was terrible. It's the kind of thing you would like to know if the real estate market is really going to work. And it had been just gestured at before. It was not, there wasn't much teeth to it. And so, for example, I remember doing a project a few years ago where we went and looked at the multiple listing service databases that all the realtors use. And we found there is a data field in there that would let you report flood risk, but it was empty. Nobody filled it out for the whole state. And so we now have a law with teeth that will help us move in a better direction. There are current policy proposals on the table regarding the coastal zone that I'm sure we'll hear more about. And some of these are really important and exciting. Okay, one way in which I think our nice natural hazard model falls apart is when we get down to actually making decisions, adaptation decisions, we discovered that we actually are living in a world of trade-offs. And we might have this very clear idea, let's reduce the impacts of climate change, but we are dealing with land use decisions and economic decisions and other things that we care about a lot as well. We want shelter. We want a livelihood. And so we have to deal with the trade-offs that are implied and work through how can we efficiently get our environmental objectives satisfied? How can we do that fairly? How can we make a transition while ensuring stability? And if you want to see how not to do it, go to Washington. Okay, as we move to the mitigation side of things, which is, as I want to remind us again, this is the part that we're not good at. We can expect more trade-offs. And in the energy policy world, it's common to talk about how we're always trying to satisfy three co-equal objectives. We want clean energy. We want affordable energy. We want reliable energy. And we want all of those at the same time. We don't want just clean energy that's unreliable or unaffordable. We don't want just affordable energy that's dirty and unreliable. We don't want just reliable energy that's expensive and dirty. We need to hit a sweet spot, and we're not good at that. Okay, if we go back, in this case, to one of the first articles I ever wrote, which was about electricity without global warming. We did that back in 1992. This was the cover of Technology Review for that issue. They'd commissioned an artist to create a horse race And it was cool. And, one horse is labeled solar, another horse is labeled nuclear, another one labeled biomass. And many people have been thinking about the energy challenge, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by finding cleaner energy sources that don't emit carbon as a horse race. Are we going to get solar first? Are we going to get wind first? Are we going to get little cute modular nuclear plants first? It's an exciting horse race, and we can place bets on it. One thing that the artist did, which in hindsight I thought was it was both jarring but also important, was he attached all of these horses to the same little buggy. And so how can you have a horse race? And in fact, what is really the underlying message here is that we need a portfolio of energy sources that are bringing us all together. We're all going in the same direction, and different horses are going to make different contributions to that common objective. Okay, a few centuries of energy consumption in the United States. It started off with wood and water, and that's still important today. We found coal, and coal became more important than wood in the 1880s. And coal is still around today, although it's not at its peak. We discovered petroleum a little bit later, and that has risen to be the dominant form of energy, and it still is today. Natural gas has come on strong and is as important now as petroleum. And nuclear came on even more recently and never quite got very far up. It contributes some, but not all. And the new generation of renewables is entering the picture. Now, a lot of this happened because of technological innovations. And when you go out and take a look at what some of them are, we can go back to 1882 and the first power plant in the United States, Edison's Pearl Street Station. Another very important milestone happened right here, and that's the creation of the PJM interconnection, the first regional interconnection that allowed scale economies to be achieved for electric power. On through exciting moments like the Great Northeast Blackout, where my grandmother was stuck in an elevator overnight, through to the first offshore wind farm, which happened to be in Denmark in 1991, and on up to today's world, where we have a fair amount of solar and wind production, but we're also inventing new uses of energy, like for data centers. Here's the New Jersey energy consumption by source picture, and you can see we've phased out coal, the dark stuff at the bottom. We rely very, very heavily on natural gas. We have diminished our petroleum use, but certainly haven't gotten rid of it. We've been relying on nuclear for 50 years, and that continues to be more important than renewables in our mix. And renewables have been around a long time, but the thin green line at the top is slowly getting a little bit fatter. Not really clear on this graph is the fact that it's flat. In other words, we've achieved a lot of energy efficiency. Our growth business as usual trend line would have had us using a lot more energy if we hadn't been doing the efficient thing. There's a mitigation timeline that I'm going to just go through very quickly just to highlight that New Jersey actually had one of the very earliest pollution control acts back in 1954. And it wasn't until the 1970s that the rest of the country caught up and passed the Clean Air Act, created the EPA, created a Department of Energy, and so forth. Moving through time, an important milestone in New Jersey was in 1999 with the ADICA Act, which sort of did some restructuring of the electric power industry. And soon after that, we launched renewable efforts, incentives of various types, and we saw nationally a variety of efforts, some of which have been important, some less so. In more recent years, we see lots of legislation in New Jersey, a lot of executive orders in New Jersey, regional efforts such as RGGI, and sporadic federal activity, most recently the Inflation Reduction Act. Rounding this out, we're seeing in New Jersey lots of executive orders in the last couple of years trying to get our energy master planning going, trying to increase our level of ambition. And that's where we are today with a new energy master plan draft ready for comments. Meanwhile, at the federal level, we are pausing a lot of the efforts. So the New Jersey energy transition is underway. Key findings from the draft that's just been released in the last couple of weeks suggests that it's feasible for New Jersey to meet its goals, but there's no guarantee. There's challenges. Society will benefit, but if we can't figure out how to do this affordably and fairly, it's not going to succeed. And an important thing, a difficult thing, is that under all of the mitigation scenarios, electricity demand is expected to increase considerably due to things like data centers and electric vehicles. And that means we are going to need new capacity. Okay, so to wrap this up, I want to claim that we will adapt to climate change. It's only a question of will we do so gracefully. We're good at adapting. We might mitigate the drivers of climate change. It's not clear to me that we know how to do that affordably yet. And finally, we ought to manage these intertwined problems in a somewhat more integrated manner. And to me, that means that we need to pay attention to resolving trade-offs and having that be a central focus of our conversation. So, thank you very much.